a little over $1 billion. And so their analysis is that incomes have really, at least in the short term, were kind of maintained through a combination of people getting unemployment insurance and like grant money, like PPP money. Plus they believe that employers kind of held people, they didn't really get rid of people to the extent that perhaps people anticipated. So it seems like incomes in the short term kind of held up more than they thought they would. And so the sales tax is still bad, but the income's a little higher, but it's still kind of short term. So I consequently kind of made the same assumptions about FY20. So I revised the estimated FY20 revenue up a little, but we since got an income tax distribution at the end of last week, and I think it'll be even higher. So I actually am thinking that we may have no deficit at all in FY20. We may end up close to being even. I was suggesting, that we'd be a little bit under and might need to use a little bit of revenue stabilization. But if I were to estimate now, I'd say I think it's going to be, that we would not really have a deficit. Now that doesn't, I'm not really doing anything about FY21 because, their estimates going forward are still pretty
bleak.
Pretty bleak, and even more so in FY22. Their estimates for FY22 are they're projecting something like a $4 to $5 billion gap for the state, and maybe
That's from all the restaurants. That's from all the restaurants that'll be out of business.
Well,
That's more than that.
Yeah.
I don't know. They have their models. I don't, that Moody's Analytics helps them with.
Jonathan, let me
yes.
ask, am I correct in thinking that unemployment is taxable income?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yes, it is. It is. Yep.
So that's kind of where that is. So I've kind of updated FY20. FY21 remains the same.
FY20, you originally were thinking about $2 million from the stabilization fund.
Yeah,
Yes.
about that. Mhm.
So if everything works out to what you're hoping and expecting, we'll leave that funding alone where it is and
Right.
have it for 21 and 22.
21.
And based on this budget, there is $2 million in revenue stabilization in 21. But I think we all agree that FY21 is going to have to be kind of looked at on an ongoing basis, and we'll kind of see how that plays out. So page 27, this again shows the changes from the county administrator budget, which was 149.7. The only thing that's changed here is this small allocations for outside agency grants is 0.03, because it's like really close to $30,000. To get to the county commissioner final budget is 143.83. Page 28 is this little survey we did of reserves. Page 29 is the list of enhancements that are not funded. Page 30, we should revisit again, because we always like to talk about this page. So, in terms of vacancies, I actually updated it. I think we've said that this changes almost by the day, and I wasn't, really intending to sort of keep it up to the minute, but we even last meeting had 2 more vacancies in, let's see, economic development was 1, and tourism, and I think 1 was in roads. So there was 30, now it's 32. We put a note at the bottom of the 7 positions that you approved last time. So those 7 are approved for hire: 3 BES, 2 general services, 1 detention center, and 1 IT. So those are going forward. So then this number, but those are included on this list, so the 32 becomes like 25. Of course, there are more that have happened in the last 2 days. So, I mean, you know, we've continued, I'm aware of, you know, I know Animal Services lost a position. Two.
Yeah.
And there were some others. Did you want to talk about some of the
Yeah,
positions?
I mean, just this past week, we lost 2 in Animal Services, one in DES Communications, and 1 in Parks, and 1 from the Sheriff's Office. 1. Lost positions.
Lost.
Yeah,
right.
lost positions.
So these were all funded positions that we voted to keep funded. These aren't, so.
Well, there were existing people that we had, you know.
So
that
my
were-
point is this something that we want to just allow these additional losses to be filled?
Oh, no,
No,
we're
we
not
have the
asking
hiring
that.
freeze on, but the hiring freeze was really meant for no additional.
Well, no,
No
I mean,
additional, but these
we
were
had to
already
get to, you sort of need to look at it in terms of the numbers. I think what I said was, we needed to kind of get to a certain level of vacancies, maybe around 35.
Okay.
In order to achieve the budget, because we really took that money out of the budget without specifying, you know, which positions
Okay.
they were, but we took dollars out equivalent to about 35. So that's what I was thinking was, we should still, you know, maintain the freeze. I mean, selectively, you still have the opportunity to
Correct, pick
choose.
and
I mean, it's
choose.
only
Yeah.
June, the year hasn't even started yet.
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, you have a choice to make, but I mean, to me, I'd say, yeah, we still need some more vacancies to be able to balance the budget.
So 35 is the magic number, give or take.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
Yeah, right,
and it's also salary level
right,
that
correct.
matters.
right.
So is there any that we need to,
There are a couple. I mean, there's 2 in the sheriff's office, and he's been working on those now for a number of months. He got hung up through the holiday season.
are those both
Early-
contractual?
One's contractual, one is a full-time position at the sheriff's office. And then out of the ones we just lost, one of them was a public safety dispatcher. So we probably need to look at maybe filling those positions, that position.
Well, why don't we, I'm fine with doing the sheriff for now, and let's wait for the DES one next
We can.
meeting and see
We
what we can,
We certainly
let's look at it that way.
Okay.
Anybody else have any
I'm good with that.
heartburn on the sheriff?
Well, one's the PIO officer, so I think it's important to get that one filled.
Right, well, I mean,
been
so
for
one's
a while.
contractual, one's
The
regular.
public
PIO
information
is the
officer
full-
was contractual?
No, that's the full-time. I think it's an administrator's
Do
contractual.
you know what those 2 positions are?
The PIO, is that contractual or is that the full-time?
It's a public information officer is full-time, and then the contractual administrative person.
What?
Public information.
PI.
Administrative assistant.
It was
Administrative
Lori, the black lady that worked for Hoffman, she went to Annapolis.
Right. I think our sheriff does a great job as a public information officer himself.
Gotta agree with you.
He spends more time down in QAC Channel 7 against a green wall than anybody.
So there's,
Feel a little jealous.
there's a consensus to allow those 2. Okay. So that, you know, that's
All right,
that's
thank you.
taken care of.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
moving on.
Page 31 is the tax differential, and we've kind of been through that. So you didn't have any real comments on that. So we approved that, provided. So their differential rates is for Centerville and Millington. And the rest are grants to the municipalities.
Really? So those are only 2 that they give it right back to the citizens?
Yeah.
Who gives it right back?
Centerville,
Centerville and
Millington.
Millington.
Delaware County is now.
The next is the outside agency grants, which is page 32 and 33. So I wasn't sure if anybody wanted to revisit that.
Anybody? No, we're good. Moving on.
Okay. Page 34 is the revenue for the Board of Education, which shows you 20 budget is 103.3 million. Their requested budget was 109, and what we provided is 105, which is based on the maintenance of effort is the 1.5 million, and then they have an 804,000, at least as of now, in additional state funds, so the total budget goes up 2.3 million. And I don't have it by category here, but I will for next week. What we have you approve is really the budget by their 12 sort of state categories, which means you're really approving their budget by, the categories are like administration, mid-level, instruction, special ed, maintenance, transportation, things like that. So you do actually approve their budget at those levels, and then if they're changing them, they really have to come back, which they do. They come back before you and say, well, we got to move money from here to there. So that's what we've
The
done.
requirement is next year's budget that they have to break it out using the Kerwin budgetary categories? My understanding was they were supposed to.
I think maybe
not.
they do, but I don't think that's what legally we would approve. Because I think the state law still provides for the normal categories, from what I understand.
Because I thought the earmarked money had to
Hey,
be
Jim.
set
That
out there so we could see it to make sure.
2,313,000.
Because
That's
it
over
gets
maintenance
audited,
effort.
so I would think it
That's-
should be public
So in other words,
information, right?
Yeah.
Maintenance effort is
I don't know, if we could just
1.542,
check, on it, we
right?
could find out.
We can check with them and.
Page 34.
Maybe MSDE or something.
So maintenance of
but,
effort is the 1.542. That's what the state says we have to give.
Jonathan?
What's that?
Back on 34, county funds, that 1.542, that's maintenance of effort. That's what the state says we must fund at maintenance of effort.
Correct.
Okay. And the 804 is actually what the state's portion
Yeah.
above maintenance of, or at maintenance of effort.
Well, it's not really, the state's portion isn't really defined as maintenance of effort. That's really sort of the formula money that was, approved by the General Assembly.
Okay, all right, so adding those two together,
Right.
you
So
get the 2.31.
Right.
Okay,
So that's really what their budget, we end up approving, like $60 million, but of course their budget is really $105 million. So we want to show it here, even though that's not, we aren't responsible for all of that.
okay. So we're funding 2,313,000 above maintenance of effort.
No.
That is maintenance of effort.
That is.
We're funding 1.5 million above maintenance of effort, because the maintenance effort only refers to the county funds.
Okay, okay.
It's
I
2
see it
million
over here.
over last year's
Okay,
budget.
I see it over
easy.
here, yep. Okay.
Now, Jonathan, do you know, does this include the extra 544,000 from the state for the teacher salaries in their budget? And does it have the other special needs uptick and all that stuff that was from last year? 'Cause my understanding is that they gave us, their raise was 3.09%. So if that's the case, then that should trigger the state money, correct? Is that in here, do you know?
I don't think it is, because I guess I have to check to make sure. Because these numbers that they have, these requested numbers, they requested like back in February or something. I don't think it would have been in at that point. So I have to check and make sure, though.
Okay. Because that'll be like another 1.2? Is that right?
Yeah. Okay, so the next part is the capital budget, and
Before we get off revenue, Jim, do you want to bring up the mouth thing?
Well, I think we'll vote on it next Tuesday.
Well, not so much vote on it, but is it in there? Do we know?
Yeah, you're referring to the funding source for the mouth.
Correct.
That's approximately
about 400,000.
about $400,000 of personal property tax
Property for
on
solar.
on the commercial solar arrays. And that money is not in this budget. It's not counted in these books. That money is set aside per some instructions to Jonathan when we first started the budget session. So, I'm going to see where you guys sit next Tuesday, bring it up for a vote, so it can go to MALF, so they have a funding source every year for this, so.
Oh, did we already
We didn't
Decide
vote
on that?
Well,
No,
we did,
We had the hearing.
see, I think we did, I mean,
Maybe there was a presentation.
did it
that
a
was
little
done.
differently this year. So actually, if you go to page 4, you go to page 4, look at this, there's a line, transfer to capital, 419,000. That is the money for Mount. So that money is in here. Because I did something differently. I mean, I kind of put it in here because I think I made the point that we never put it in the budget, but we always give it to them in the end anyway. So.
Well, yeah, that's when we didn't have a source for it.
Right, so I put, so anyway, I put money in here, actually put in a little more than that. We cut it back to this level, so it has been essentially equivalent to the personal property for solar. So that is in here.
So the expense is the,
So that
The revenue
419,000
side.
is what we would give to Mount.
right, but is it shown, is it on the revenue side too? It's there on the expense side, but is it
Yes,
on the
it
revenue?
is, it's, well, you can't see it specifically, but if you go to page 2, it's part of the, well, it's just in the line real and personal property taxes.
Right.
So it's in that, it's in the 70 million.
Okay, so it's covered.
So it is covered. We did it differently this time.
Right, which is fine, how you do it, but it's still sitting there waiting for this vote.
Yeah,
And then
right.
it'll be allocated to the MALF program when it
Right.
comes.
And what a perfect funding source.
Well, it's just, now it's no longer, well, should we give 700, 800, 900, $1 million? It's, here's the funding source. If you want more, get out there and sell them. Commercial grade solar. So, yeah, okay. And we'll bring that up at next Tuesday's meeting for that.
Okay. Okay, so page 35, this is kind of a recap of what's really already been done. If you go to, let's see, page 40, it will show you kind of what happened to the bottom line capital budget, which was 41.9 million. County administrator's budget, 1.2 million, was then reduced to get to 40 million, but then when we had the bonds at 19 million and wanted to reduce them, that's what this 5.9 million is, to get down to a total of 34.681, which is actually then 13 million in bonds. And that's shown on the next page. On page 41 is the bonds and how we brought that down. And then last time, we moved the library expansion money out to FY '22, so that gives us 13 million in bonds. And following
What was last year's bond for the public?
9.
9, okay.
So then there's the 6-year program, which goes up through page 48. Page 49 shows you for the 6 years, the various funding sources. So the bonds, starting in FY '21, so sort of in the middle there, the column that says bonds is, I mean, and again, these out years are not set in concrete, but, so it's in that range, 13, 14, 12 to 14 million for the next 4 years per what's in here now.
Now, Jonathan, put that into perspective in terms of where the bond would be at the end of the 6 years. We're retiring how much?
We're retiring about 8 million a year. So,
So if you take 48 million off that 63, the bond would only increase by about 15 million over the next 6 years.
right, and so we'd get to about that, we'd be at about the one, or I think it'd be a little above 150, or maybe the low 150s.
I think it'd be below, right?
Maybe
Because we're
high
128.
140s.
Yeah, it comes in.
So it'll be
a
about
little-
143.
It's less.
Yeah.
And the other fact that's an interesting fact, I think, is that we have an actual numerical cap, which the 150, the 3,000 per citizen. And that actually, as you go through the years, we've been doing this for 6 years now, and that cap's that steady, which means that if you take inflation, it's actually reduced by couple percent a year, that the amount we're spending and the amount it takes to raise the revenue to do it has actually been descending. So the cap is getting lower and lower and lower. So this is, we're in very good shape, sir.
Okay, then.
I actually
Okay.
understood that.
So, starting on page 50 is the FY '21 capital budget. And if you go to, I mean, I won't go over the details. I know we're going to go through the balance, the list of balances. But, so on page 53 is the, sort of the bottom line, which is showing you the various funding sources. And the 13 million is where we got to in the bonds. And starting on page 54 is what we talked about, or started talking about last time. And I think you should have a large, I put in the fold,
Yeah.
larger sheet that's more, it's on big paper. So, not sure how you want to approach that, but, you know, Todd and I have kind of gone through this list a couple times and tried to come up, and kind of went back to the departments to try to get as good a sense of, you know, if there's funds that are there, kind of where are they? Do they need those? Are they really going to use them? Are they projects which are actually need to be closed and that sort of thing? So,
And what was your responses there? I mean, I'm looking at a lot of these that are above 90%. To me, are they done? I mean, how many of these projects in here did you get a response from that says, we're finished there, that's complete? Or is somebody just wanting to sit on that just in case there's, you know, something breaks? I don't know. I mean,
well, they're not necessarily sitting on them. I mean, I would say, I mean, one of those that I know we talked about was Cross County Connector Trail, which does
Right.
have money, which.
Yeah, that one's clearly done. There's still some money going back and forth between the state, but it's finished. And, but the rest of the projects, most of them are either, they're ongoing. A lot of them are still ongoing projects. There are a few that we can close. That's one of them, but I know there's still some transactions. We have some money that we can recapture there from the Cross County Connector Trail, probably about 350,000 there. And I think there was 25,000 for the Downs building. That project's, obviously, we gave that building to the Arts Council, so there was some capital fund balance there in that project, so that can be recaptured. And there is some funding in the watershed implementation plan, the WIP, that we could redesignate if we care to do so. That's project number.
And the Davidson property
647.
improvements, that stuff's tied up, right? Because it was grant.
Well, that's POS money that
Right,
we
that's what I'm saying. That's-
sort of
yeah.
put there for the development of that park. Now,
Haven't
I
done
know,
anything over there, so.
yeah, well, they may want to reallocate some of that to other projects. They're talking about that now, the Parks Department, but that is a grant source there that is available for park development and park projects, other park projects.
So how much do you think in the WIP is,
I mean, when you look at, you know, airport capital equipment from FY15. I mean, you know, I look at that, and I mean, it was total funding 136,678. That's 96% spent. Is this something that's an
Well, it's-
ongoing, every year they're spending something on capital? Or is it?
That's a grant. I guess I
That's
don't know what
grant
that one is,
funds,
but it's a
though.
grant. It's a grant fund. You look at the source across the top there. I didn't really.
That's what I'm saying. So those are all, these are like open end. They're not a specific
Yeah.
one item. It's
It
just,
keeps
Right.
coming in. It's like the snowplow pickup truck we
Right.
bought in the last year, and
Well-
on it goes. It'll never zero out.
I mean, to me, you could sort this list and get rid of everything that has grants on it, because that has nothing to do really. If it's-
Correct.
If
That's
it's not a
actually
grant from
true.
us, you know, just remove that to lessen
Oh,
what we
I
need
see.
to, you know what I mean? Because we're not gonna be touching anything
different
that's
sheet.
grant money, right?
well, right, and this, I mean, you
With the
know,
exception of, like you said, you know, like, I mean, Todd, what's public drainage? We have bonds in there, we got grant money in there, and miscellaneous money in there. I mean, it just,
Yeah, that was originally a project that we set up for tax ditch maintenance and projects like that, but it's also now been, we're going to retitle that to public drainage and MS4, the MS4 requirements, which we
Okay.
have to file our notice of intent
There
for
you go.
July 1st. And we were going to suggest combining the watershed implementation plan funds up into that because they're kind of the same thing. So, and as part of that, we could probably recapture about 200,000 out of the watershed implementation plan project. We do have about 200,000 there for outstanding payments we have to make on several projects that we have ongoing that haven't been completed yet on the WIP program.
So
that
that
was
goes
another-
for enterprise funds. I mean, that's really not something.
Right, no,
Yeah,
you
so
wouldn't,
those-
that's not really available.
Right, so these are, we should reduce this list down, removing those.
Yeah, the countywide mapping program I looked at, and I thought you could probably get 50,000 out of that in terms of what I think they're actually planning to do.
Well, how much did you target, Jonathan, from what you went through?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I had an actual number, but it was somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million that I thought you could get. I mean, we've just now identified 75, about 600,000.
Yeah, about 600,000. So we're in that range, I think.
I mean, you know, there are projects here that really are ongoing, that maybe you may see a bunch of money like EMS replacement vehicles, but they're buying ambulances with that, so that may just be something that's not.
Right, but what they're doing though, that they're using one account, putting money in that account every year, buying an ambulance, and it's a rolling number versus FY '21, one ambulance, we allocate
See,
a
I
certain
don't
amount of
think
money, they buy the ambulance, and if there's anything left, it should come back to us.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Well-
that doesn't happen. It stays in there under that account. That's
See,
my
I
point.
think the ambulance, I think that project will basically get spent, because they come in for that every year, and they say, and they give us a list of what they're gonna buy. There are some other projects which may have money that carries forward from year to year. And you're right, I mean, they are required to come back to you if they want to spend it. Let's say if they want to move it somewhere else, they have to come back to you.
But they don't, because we leave it in that one account. And that's my
If
point,
you-
is on those large ticket items should be, that account's open for that large ticket item. When it's purchased, it's closed, and that money comes back. And we don't do that. So, I mean, that's, to me, I think that's where when I look at these things and I look at the dates on these, FY '14, FY '13, FY '06, I mean, these are ongoing, where we're putting money, and they're spending from that pool of money. And that's fine for some
Well-
things, but not for all.
The way to deal with that, I mean, I'm sorry.
Well, to that point, is an example is the county facilities program. It was open since FY '07. It's got a balance of $215,907. Last spent out was March of this year, but we don't know how much. So if it was its own project instead of a facilities program from '07, and here we are in 2020.
Right.
Whatever that program is, it should be dated 2019 if we did it in last year's budget, or 2020 if we do it in this year's budget, just so it looks current to what you're spending out of it.
Correct.
Because that 215,000, how long has that been sitting there? And how could it be used elsewhere right now? And then refund or fund whatever another part of that county
When it
project
becomes
program would be
necessary to do it.
specifically.
Right.
And it could easily be, according to Jonathan, when Dr. See-Through in the ambulance for the CARES program,
yeah.
wouldn't that lighten up one future 350? See what I'm saying?
I'm not sure that Scott would agree with that. I think the ambulance that he had in the budget, I don't actually know the answer, but I think
I'm just
that,
pointing out,
I mean, I think he may have
Well, there's two
thought
of them.
that there was an
You got an
additional.
ambulance and a sprint van.
One's a scout vehicle, one's an ambulance.
Right.
But the ambulance is $372,000. So, I mean, that seems like that ought to,
Should be recaptured.
if the whole CARES thing goes through, but maybe you don't count it till you get it. I don't know.
Well, we cut the FY '21 capital where they had asked for an additional ambulance, so that was.
Right, that's
This
true,
This
yeah.
is these are other funds that are
Okay.
still remaining.
Good
Yeah,
enough.
so this is from, Well, I would say this, I mean, the way you could try to get at that would be to look at year end and then determine, so if we came back and did this, let's say in September, we could say, okay, the year ends really in June, but it doesn't really end until September from an accounting standpoint. So if we got to September and said, okay, you can take every project and say, where did they end up the fiscal year? And then you could say, do they have money left or not? And we could come back to you and just show you this list at that time. I think it would be more realistic because it would get at what you're saying, which is, do they carry forward money to the next year?
Right.
If you look at the end of the year, then you'll know, right?
I mean, let's just look at the detention center furniture and carpet from FY07. So that must have been when that account was first opened, was '07. There's $30,000 in it. And they've
Which
only
number is that?
Page 2?
Yeah, 281.
Page 1.
Is it page 1? Yeah, 281. So I'm just saying, there's 30,000 in there. They've spent $9,800, and they've got 20,000 left, but they spent that in March 19th of 2019.
Right.
So, when somebody comes to us and they say, I need furniture, I need carpet, they have an estimate. If you don't spend it in a year, then it's coming back to the general fund. So.
Use it or lose it.
You're right. That's, and I get it. So it sounds like that account was open from '07, and that's just, well, when they need something, that's what we put it, they spend from that account. And I don't think we should be conducting business that way. I think we should close those accounts.
Right. And
just everything that we just approved in this budget should come out as a line item on this revenue sources and this document as FY21. You follow what I mean? So everything we approved on the budget that's capital or projects, whatever the case may be, should be in here as FY21. It shouldn't go into an account from FY07 or FY7 or, you know what I mean? I think.
Right, so you're saying,
Make it
I
right,
say 100%.
Yeah.
all of this money, right, I mean, you can look at any of these projects, and there is, in many cases, there will be additional money in FY '21 that
goes
isn't even
into-
showing up in here.
Right.
But show the total, don't show the past money. Show the new total money. In other words, I
Right.
agree with you, fiscal year ends June 30th, going forward into 21 July 1st, basically all these, whatever's left in there comes back. We decide, you bring it, say, okay, can we recapture that money now because it's not going to get spent? Obviously, you've got stuff that's 5 years hasn't been spent out, and then it all becomes an FY21 budget item, like Jim's saying, because then you're just dealing with 1 year at a time, not necessarily looking at it in terms of the dollars spent, but the dollars that are still there, they're in FY21 dollars, like the revenue source. It is a revenue source at that point, and it's sitting there. But we're not seeing it because it's sitting here in this account from FY07, and it's basically a piggy bank that's just sitting there till you need it, and you open it up when you need it. And I agree 100%. It just needs to be transferred into each budget year so we know what we're dealing with.
I mean,
That gets us to where we got to move money. We know that, okay, this money's not needed. And we'll know at June 30th or July 1st, not next year this time when we're trying to craft a budget. We already know.
But again, I'm not picking on the detention center, but it's an easy line item to look at. It's a small amount. But the last time they used it was in March of '19, which is well over a year ago.
Right.
Either you need the carpet or the furniture or you don't. So to me, it hasn't been purchased in well over a year. Let's close that out and bring that back to the general fund. Because it must not be a true need. And that's what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of these things here, maybe that aren't so much a true need that we can clean up. And if they are a true need, well, let's transfer it from FY whatever and bring it up to FY21, and here's the budget for that item. Just to clean it up. I'm not a big fan of leaving them open because we have no clue how much money has ever ran through that account. Unless you're telling me these project open since you got total all funding. So you're saying from FY06 or FY07 that some of these projects, we don't know if that was a one-time allocation or if that was an allocation over the years that's been added and brought up to that total.
Yes, well, we could show you that if you wanted, but then the spreadsheet would be
No, I understand.
about that.
And I don't want it, but that's my point, is if we just close it out every year
Make it simple.
and get rid of it and then restart
Right,
over.
so that's kind of what it sounds like. So what we're saying is, we'll kind of start with the end of, we can go in September, let's say, and sort of look at where everything ends up. And then, you can see what there needs to come out, and as you say, be shifted into FY '21, then we can start looking at FY '21 as just a separate year and just look at that separately and say, okay, that's your FY '21 money. Then we'll do the same really with FY '21. We get to the end of FY '21,
Right,
we'll
right.
say, did you spend it or not?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And if you didn't, then we have a reason why, Commissioner?
Yeah, let me ask you a philosophical question about this. In government, there's a sort of dangerous principle that when departments get issued money, they spend it so that, you know, it's use it or lose it. Right now, in a way, it constitutes a form of saving that the department did not go ahead and use that money. If you're going to recapture it, they're going to say, okay, well, let's just use this up.
Buy the carpet that they
But-
don't need because they
See
got to
the
spend
point
it
I'm
maybe the
raising?
next
I'm
time.
Well, but I would argue
But
that,
we gotta evaluate the
I would
request
argue that fact that when they come before us and say, I need a car, I need a vehicle, we have to be frugal in our due diligence to say, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Or we say, yes, you do, and that's the amount of money that you're going to buy for that car. It is a true need, not a want. So, I mean, I get your point, yeah. I mean,
I'm
the
not-
military was like that too. You spend it or
wasn't-
lose it, and the Marine Corps used to
wasn't
love
a
always give
vote.
money back. So we had the shittiest bases. So anyways.
It wasn't a vote against, I was just.
No,
raising-
I get it, but that's my point, you know, so, and we've had this conversation with some of the departments that, well, there's some money left, let's go buy a Gator, let's go get this, let's go get that, and they come in and they buy it, and I don't remember ever approving it in a budget, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anybody's doing anything here that's mischievous or wrong, I just think that it's a lot easier when we're looking at all these, and, you know, the millions of dollars that could very well be tied up in here, some of this doesn't need to be here. I mean, the grant, like I said, the grants and the enterprise, I get it. You know, those we don't even need to look at. I mean, you know, we just monitor those, but everything else that we're appropriating the money for, if it's not spent, needs to come back. Needs to come back because we do have some needs.
There could be needs somewhere else, that's right. I mean, there could be needs over here where there's not needs here, and we need to shift it to where the needs are at that time.
I mean, because we've always looked at the county's facilities program, and we know what that is. I mean, that's an every year ongoing thing. But it should be closed out every year.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just think it needs to be closed out every year and say, okay, I mean, you can look at the historical data for that FY '07 county facilities program, and you can look, Jonathan, then that expanded Excel spreadsheet
Right.
at every year, how much money we put. If we're putting the same amount of money in there every year, that's great, you know? I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but at least bring it up to date. It's just, you know, I just think that just,
Well, as Jonathan mentioned, this is a snapshot as of
Absolutely.
a couple of weeks ago, and I
Yeah.
think they typically, a lot of these funds do get spent down by the end of the fiscal year, and there's other things that come up from time to time. So we're really not looking at it from the true standpoint of the end of fiscal 20 in a lot of these cases.
Right, but
Now,
so
there are
Jonathan, you
some other
said we should
projects-
look at it in September, he said?
Yeah, that's probably a better time.
do you have any idea what the county facilities program, what do we put in there every year? Is that in the capital
300,000.
anywhere? Excuse me?
About 300,000.
There you go. So instead of it looking like we put in there $3.1 million and we spent 2.9 and we have $215,000 left, you know, so if we put about 300 in every year, so then this year I would say, look it, let's put only in 100 because you're already at 215 and
Well,
carry
that's
it.
true, but the year's not over. So,
Understand.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you
Right.
think about, I mean, I kind of defend that program because I know they do a lot of, you know, things
Oh,
that.
but see, that's my point. We're not saying that's a bad program. We're just saying when we as commissioners and the general public look at it, they go, well, it looks like they've, you know, total funding and total spent through since FY '07 is this amount. Where does it say how much we're spending a year on that amount?
Well, that would be an interesting, and we could do that too. That would, I think, would be interesting. What I'd like to do is look at that since FY '07. We could take every year and say, here's how much they got budgeted, and here's how much they spent.
Right. But again, you know, the past is the past. That's historical data. But I'm just saying, moving forward, I don't think
Right.
I don't know why we need to project that total funding since FY '07 is $3.158 million. Why can't we just say that, you know, for this, what this facilities program is, we're putting $300,000 in it a year because it does X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I don't know, is there a benefit to showing us that we've spent since FY '07 $3.1 million on that? Because, you know, to me or anybody else, it looks like that's a project that's been going on since '07.
Exactly.
And it's got $215,000 in it.
But you could look at it as, I mean, one way to look at it is, yeah, they've got 3.1 million. They've really spent 93% of that.
Correct.
2.9 over that period of time, too.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the reason it's shown there is because, I mean, the capital budget is unlike the general fund in that you can carry forward the money. In the general fund, you can't even do that. So this is just kind of saying, yeah, here's the total of all their appropriations.
But if you had that FY07, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you and
That's all
beating
right.
this dead horse, but if you had another column that says annual distribution, 300,000, then I'd understand that.
Or average.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
If you wanted to do the
something-
historical
right.
side and still have it in there, you can make a column that says average annual distribution
Right.
as a comparison to what you had to do one year. Because if there's a red flag raised that said, oh, well, you've been averaging 200,000 here, this year you spent, or needed 300, why? You know, what's the reason for it? So,
That's all. Just makes it easier for everyone to look at this and go, that makes perfect sense.
and I'm in agreement with, we do it August, September timeframe, because I think that helps too, because that's, you know, about when he's going to start ratcheting up for the next year's budget. So now you already have these numbers, and again, we don't have to go through them on the last night of the budget work session to try and figure out what's there. We'll already have the numbers, and they'll help some of the departments, probably help the department's budget too, because if you give them that average annual data, that may help them look at what they've been asking
Right.
for and help them out when they go into budget time.
Right, so, yeah, we can do the averages, and we can, Brittany will be happy to do that for you.
Okay.
Okay. So, having said that, so we have some good ideas here. I'm actually thinking we could put that in the budget resolution. You know, it's sort of what our intent is, but we'll talk about the resolution in a minute. So we've identified some funds. Did you want to talk about sheriff cars, or what?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Fire it up.
If we've got that savings, I would like to see the sheriff's cars pulled out of the bond and use that savings to pay for the sheriff cars. In addition to the bond, I would like to add, and it's up to you guys, where the Broadband Advisory Commission, I'm sure you guys, we got a letter from them requesting some stipend to help with the grants that'll be available in the late summer, early fall for broadband projects, in addition to the CARES money we got. So what I'd like to do is basically put a marker in there for an amount that's available to them if opportunities come between now and then. And again, we could put it as, it would be bond now, but we don't necessarily have to go to bond with it next year if the money isn't needed, you know what I'm saying? But to have it there available if we need it for these projects. So long story short, this past week, I reached out to Congressman Harris's office to ask a question about the CARES money, because right now most people think that this money that we have designated for the broadband, which we did about $700,000, that money has to be spent, the projects have to be completed by December 31st, 2020, and it really limits what you can do with that money at that point, because most of these projects, broadband projects, aren't shovel-ready today. And the irony of it is, the understanding is that a lot of the fiber is coming from the Wuhan province in China, which even complicates things worse. So again, it's just an issue of these projects would not be complete by December 31st. So the money that we have from the CARES is not going to probably affect the most people it could in terms of getting connectivity out there. So my proposal to the Congressman's office to go back to Congress and ask the question, look, if we're under contract with some of these projects by December 31st, and I think Todd has said the language said incurred costs, so there's some flexibility there. That way, we could leverage the $700,000 maybe into a lot more when this other round of grants that's going to be available for rural broadband in late summer comes out. Maybe we could turn that 700 into $3 million, similar to what we did with the mouth money. But the Broadband Advisory Committee has some projects in the hopper that may or may not go that way, and based on the answer we get, we can maybe use the CARES money, but they're asking us to have a stipend there just in case. So we can.
What do you mean by stipend? Give me.
They're, I think 150,000 is what they were looking for to have as for, is that right, John? Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, right, I mean, we originally had 500,000.
Right, we cut it all out.
But, yeah, right, and so, I think, right, they were looking for anything as a placeholder. I think 150 or 200 would be.
And if it could be supplanted by the CARES money, it never goes to bond. It doesn't matter.
Correct.
So,
well, first off, the sheriff's vehicles. We had the same problem with the IT, the Chromebooks.
Correct.
You know, the Board of Ed would come out, and one year it was going to be 1.6 million, one year it was going to be 800,000. It goes up and down, up and down. You look at the 6-year for the cars, the vehicles, they go as high as 740,000, and it goes as low as 340,000. I'd like to just take every year, here's X amount of dollars for vehicles. I just think that, it helps us with budgeting. So he's at 742 this year, and I think if we roll back this year's and increase next year's, and what page was that on, Jonathan? That 6-year for the,
Oh, the 6-year?
Yeah.
That's next year's 7th, Jim. I think
It was on
6.
46, or was it
Starts at 49.
40, you look at the 6-year starts on 43?
Yeah, this year, the sheriff was looking for 631,000 for.
right, but where's,
Cars.
show me, let's get to the 6-year.
Oh, you want to see what it is over,
Yeah, so,
over the 6 years?
correct. Because it's
So,
listed as
I think that's on
48.
42.
42 it starts, yeah.
So sheriff cars, which is then about, if you look at, are you on 42? You see the 621's kind of down near the bottom?
You're right, 621, then it goes to 415,
It's four-
436, 458. I mean, he's hovering right around, 500,000 or 475,000. And to me, why can't we just make 475,000 the number? Is it critical to get this year at 621? That's my question. And that's a question if we could, ask the sheriff. It'll increase next year's and the year after, but it'll decrease this year's. But at least now we know every year we're going into this and we need to find $475,000 for new vehicles for the sheriff's office.
Just like the ambulance. I mean,
Yeah,
similar
yeah,
to what we do
exactly.
with the
So, I
ambulance.
mean, we know
we've
pretty
been
much
doing
it's budget.
375 for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Right.
I got to say, I don't see the point, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I don't really see the point of the argument because we are the bank. And some years, departments, maybe 6 cars come up or something special comes up. We react to that. Our general pool of money is such that we can absorb those ups and downs, and they average out. I don't see the point of trying to make it steady every year, which may inconvenience the departments we're serving. I mean, I don't see
Well,
the point.
that's
We
an
could-
interesting fact. I look at it the other way around, saying,
Yeah.
well, if somebody knows that vehicle's got to last 6 years, they'll make sure that vehicle lasts 6 years. Versus, well, let's get a new vehicle. I mean, that door will swing both ways.
Yeah.
But the
So-
sheriff's also the sheriff's a little different because his is based on a 7-year systemic program. So he told us he does 10 cars a year for 7 years. And my understanding in doing some fact checking here, there's been years where they've done, or the systemic program used to be 10 years or 9 years, whatever. So we could even look at it from that standpoint. What if you did 8-year systemic? There's a savings involved there, but it's going to be the same. If you put the same in, and I agree with Jim, you put the same in, the sheriff's changing cars every year. So if that money's really not going to fluctuate, maybe 1 or 2% depending on the cost, knowing that money is $475,000 a year, is much easier to deal with than having a $200,000 bump to 621 back down to 470. That I agree. I think if there's
Well,
a number
and
there,
again,
and
we've
it's
been
every year.
trying to get that off the bond. We've been trying to pay go,
Yeah, right.
fund balance, whatever we can do. And if we know it's a specific dollar amount, I think it makes it easier for you to budget so that doesn't go on the bond. Because what is it when we put it on the bond? How much does it cost us then?
600.
840,000.
Oh, you mean?
840,000
On a $621,000.
over 20 years.
Right, over 20 years. So, I mean, that's all I'm saying. I mean, we can leave it at 621 if you want, but I think,
He
to
got
me,
10, I will say this, he hasn't gotten 10 cars every year. The last couple of years, he's gotten 6 or 7, because we haven't budgeted more than, I think it's been under 400,000 the last few years. So I'm not exactly sure how his replacement schedule is working, but I don't think, 10 is a lot for 1 year. It's more than I've seen that he's gotten. So he did seem to think that this year was a year that they had a lot of need, so.
And I have no problem, Jim, I have no problem covering what he's asking for this year, but I just would like to see us sit down going forward and have something that is a little bit more, if it is 6 cars a year, 7, whatever it is, just knowing what it is will be, I think, honestly, I think it would help, just to know what
I
that
don't think it
number
was,
is.
I think when he gave us the number of cars a year, I think that was like an approximation. It's going to be different.
right.
every year, depending on when the cars are put into the fleet in use. So they might not be balanced out. I'd like to hear from the sheriff a little bit more about
Right, I agree.
how that would work with him.
But I'm only going by the numbers he presented when he was here that night.
Yeah.
He said 70 cars, and he said they do a 7-year systemic, so you would figure that average would be 10 a year if you were doing a full 7-year cycle. So, I mean, I don't know what the real car numbers are, or whatever it is. They're just going by what the numbers we had. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, have we, in this past projects, did
So
we
we
find
have-
savings where we could,
We have, what I have here is, we have identified the right amount for the sheriff. What I have is 625.
Okay.
Sheriff is 621. By using the Downs building, I took 50,000 from countywide mapping, the cross-county connector trail, and then WIP comes out to 625. If you wanted to do another, and it sounded like if you wanted to do another 150, I guess.
well, we're pulling 620 off the bond. So my question is, can we put the 150 back as a place marker and maybe never bond it if the other part works out with the, for right now, the 150 for BBAC, we just designated as bond money right now. And then,
Oh, so you would just, you don't.
because we're not going to sell the bond until next year, and
Right.
I mean, we may not need it
use
next
it.
year. Right? It may be a moot point, but at least it's
150 into the bond for public fiber, basically.
correct.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that, or
Yeah,
would you rather see us get the cash and see if we can save the cash the other way, or what?
well, a point I've raised to all of you guys at different periods of time is that there's a kind of marginal gray area between expensing and bonding stuff. And we have drifted some stuff into bonding, which could have been probably more correctly expensed. But at the same time, what we did with that money was not spend it. We didn't waste it. It's sitting in our accounts as cash. And that gives us a AAA bond rating, gives us the flexibility to do the stuff we want to do. And the point I made in the last meeting was, I, generally speaking, at this period of history, think it's a pretty good idea to keep your cash as high as you can. So this ain't a bad idea. It's not the year I would have done it, but I'm not going to get in a row about it. But I mean, the people that would be alarmed by it would be the bond raters, and believe me, they love us. And we'll continue to love us.
Honestly, I think right now, I don't think we're going to do it. It's not nothing crazy. We're just kind of cleaning up some stuff probably going forward. I mean, we're not getting into our rainy day funds or anything like that to do any of this, really, so I think.
No, I mean, but again, like I say, I think 21 and 22 are going to be interesting. And look, we're dealing with 600,000 or something. This isn't making a break in the bank, but as a general principle, if we hadn't done this, we wouldn't have these cash amounts. That's a fact. So, I mean, it's why we look as good as we do. So, this is not a make or break deal, but the general principle is what it is. I mean, we have, truth of the matter is, we could currently have, instead of 130 million, we could have 100 million and no cash.
Right.
And we're spending at a level right now that we probably, instead of having an 85-cent tax rate, should be 95. But how we've done that is this. That's the realities.
okay,
Okay, so, what we would do is, so we're gonna reduce the bond by 625,000 by taking those projects. We're gonna take the sheriff cars out of the bonds, and we're gonna fund them by taking money from these other projects to the tune of 625,000. Then we're gonna add back 150,000 to pay for the public fiber. So we're still reducing the bonds, if you all agree with what I'm saying here, by 475,000 more.
correct.
Be
Under
It could be, and it could be that we don't need that 150,000.
Right.
Right.
Because the
Come
CARES money may supplant it before the end of the year, and we may not
I
even do
think we'll
it.
hear back that
But
from
we were
the,
hoping to hear before today, but it's the federal government, so we're just waiting for them to get back to us. And Todd's waiting for a letter back from the state as well, so.
I think it's a good
Hopefully
move.
by next Tuesday, we'll know.
I think it's a good move.
Okay?
Yep,
So, with that, if we're done with the capital project balances, then the last thing is the budget resolution. And this is, I mean, the budget resolution has some kind of standard things in here which have to do with the tax rate, and so it specifies the tax rate for the Kent Narrows as well. It shows the sanitary district 2.5% increase that you voted for. It does show that the recordation tax, which we primarily moved almost all of it into the general fund, and still have designated 15 cents to the critical workforce program. And let's see, I'm on page 58, and I'm going to page 59. Talks about financial status reports. There's a clause here about just to sort of codify that the airport is continuing to repay this loan, which had to do with when we bought hangars. Then the ticket books, we did say we were going to increase another $5 in 21 and then another $5 increase in 22. So that's kind of codified here also. It refers to the Board of Education, maintenance of effort.
John, hold on a second. Todd, remind me, how many tickets are in a book?
15.
15?
And I guess the background, it's been a while since we talked about that, but the background behind that is we were losing roughly $300,000 a year in the tipping fees. As the tipping fees have gone up, unfortunately, over the last 6 years, the dumping fees have not on this end. So it's supposed to be more, I guess, operated like an enterprise fund where it's equal in, equal out. And it's,
Right, this is not the county trying to find a new source of revenue, we're just
No,
trying to
this
make
is
up
just
for the
closing
shortfall.
it, right.
So this is to cover expenses.
Yeah, it's not quite an enterprise, but we wanted ticket books to cover the tipping fees, the cost to dispose.
right. No, it's not enterprise,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying it kind of should be like one where
At
it's
least, yeah.
equal in, equal out.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Board of Education, the next clause is about the categories. So that kind of long paragraph there is a way of saying that you do adopt the budget by categories, and the board is required to come back to you if they want to move funds between the categories. So you'll have that next week for approval. The next clause does say,
Real quick, Jonathan, on that. So
Next clause does say,
Is is that major, only the major categories? In other words, so if they said they wanted to take something just from X, they only have to say it's going to Y. They don't have to specify like it's going to pay for school buses or it's going to do this, correct? It's just those 8 major categories?
the major categories, so it would be like if they were moving it from school buses to instructional salaries or something.
Right, but they don't have to tell us where it may be spent. It's just moving, just so the public understands, as commissioners, we have those 8 categories. That's what we see the money transferring between. We don't see once it gets past there. That's typically a Board of Education, something that they would do at their level.
They just, right, exactly, we don't, right, we really only have sort of control with that category level.
Right.
Okay, so this clause is about capital projects, which we've had in there for the last few years, but we've discussed, we're going to expand on that, and I'm going to draft something that will reflect what we talked about tonight, you know, about kind of looking at it at the end of the year, and then looking at it each year as a separate, you know, how much did you spend in that particular year? I ask you at this point if there are other, you know,
yes,
resolved clauses that you want to put in there.
I would put in the mouth clause. If you can write it both ways, so depending how the vote goes, you can either have it with it in there or have it without it in there.
But the clause is, what is, the clause is saying that
That
those funds.
be it
are
resolved
dedicated-
that the revenue generated from the
Right.
personal property tax on commercial solar will be used for farm preservation in Queen Anne's County. And you can word that any way you want to word it, but
Okay.
to that gist.
Or just one without that in there. Then you got to cover both ways.
That's right.
Okay. Well, if there are any other clauses that you think of, although I guess we're going to try to give this to Margie tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So it goes in the book. But so if you think of something between now and tomorrow, we'll make it a clause.
So Jonathan, these revenue estimates you're getting from this SStat and all that kind of stuff, obviously, the property tax side is pretty solid, but the income tax is like the question mark. And I guess, did they talk on your calls with the comptroller's office and all that about the fact that it's very hard to estimate revenue when you probably haven't got 20% of the tax returns back, and you're not getting them until July 15th? And basically every county in the state, everybody's got to have their budgets drafted, adopted, and in the books by then. It's really kind of hard. It's, you got a small dart and a big dartboard right now. Until those first returns start coming in, I don't think we really know where we're going to be, right? I mean,
You know,
they
we
talk about that?
that all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's,
In like, how solid or predictable are these numbers? That's why they have these sort of, at the state, they have these fancy models, but we don't really have those. So we actually don't have tremendous amount of data.
but we had COVID models, and thankfully they were way off from what they originally said too. So, but yeah, I mean, and then you have the October timeframe, which honestly, I think you're going to see a big uptick in the October tax returns because that's your business tax returns. So there's probably a good chance a lot of businesses are going to forego the early filing for the later filing this year just because of financial situation. So,
Well, we do have, anything we've gotten on income tax so far is through March. So it doesn't really tell you very much.
about COVID, right?
Right, but starting, when you start seeing April, which we will see in the next couple months. So, by August, September, we will have some income tax data that should show, like the 3 months of, let's say, April, May, June.
Right.
So that'll help us. I have anecdotally, the property taxes from just talking to SStat, just to reflect that, are, the commercial side does seem to be down.
Yeah.
But the residential is not. Residential, and they are doing Kent Island now, and it seems like it's holding steady.
Yeah, as long as we get back on our feet and there's not a lot of people losing their homes and things like that, we won't have that hangover effect that that came from the last downturn, from the other recessions. So hopefully we kind of just hop right over that, right back into a good economy in third quarter.
Yeah, Jonathan, I saw when, in your little review of other counties and who had hit their reserves, when I saw that Baltimore City hadn't even touched any reserves, I thought that certainly is a unlikelihood.
That was kind of, surprising, because
But it could have been they just hadn't done it yet.
But they don't have any.
I think it's just fake.
Yeah. I don't see him not doing it, but I guess he didn't want to touch it. Today is primary day. So I imagine they'll touch it tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow might be a little news.
Exactly.
Well, you got to remember too, and I guess because last year was a lot of counties did that tax hikes. A lot of counties did tax hikes. So now they're just recognizing that revenue. So this year they're actually seeing that bump. So they may not need to this year.
Right.
But come next year, when that little bit more of the effects start to trickle in, that's when you may see them start to, have to hit the rainy day funds and that. That's what I'm saying. The Anne Arundel County, all those big counties, some took their property or income tax to 3.2. A lot of them did. I think we're up to 18 counties now at 3.2. So,
But when you look at the skew of like people that lose jobs, but they're usually at the lowest end of the income bracket scheme, and then the upper end, which doesn't lose jobs, but it has capital gains losses because all of a sudden you're not, it's a really hard guess to make.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to keep coming back and talking about it every few months or something like that.
Days.
Maybe every few weeks. Well, that's all that we have here,
Okay.
really.
Anybody got any questions on this budget? Anybody?
No, but I got something other than the budget, just want to bring up while we're
Absolutely.
here.
Okay.
If I could do that now. So we have the governor allowed the outdoor dining to open up on Friday, but there's some confusion as to exactly what does outdoor dining mean. If you're out there and the stars above your head, we know you are. If you're tucked in a closet with no windows, we know you're indoors, but there is somewhere in between. And it's been some confusion for our businesses and for our citizens. So what I would like to do is, I guess I'll just do it by a motion, is I'd like to make a motion that in this county, in interpreting that executive order, that we say that outdoor seating areas include areas utilizing tents, canopies, and coverings, as well as spaces in any structure or building not actually enclosed on all sides by permanent walls or other physical barriers, and any other structure or spaces that the Queensland County Health Officer or his designee determines is sufficient to permit appropriate circulation of outdoor airflow.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on this? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chris and I actually talked about this, and I'm just a little concerned that the language that doesn't have four sides is going to cut. I mean, everything's got four sides. Annie's got four sides. I don't know if Crab Deck doesn't have four sides. And what I'd mentioned to you was just using a construction like any building which has sufficient airflow as to maintain safety, and stay away from any language about specifics of the wall descriptions, because you may wind up doing something you didn't want to do, but just the construction of maintenance of safety seems to me to get to the point you're wanting to get to. Do you see anybody understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe that's not a good idea. I'm just throwing it out, because I'm a little concerned that Annie suddenly is open, but it isn't. And, your Crab Deck has got garage doors. None of these things fit the description that the governor sent.
Right, and it would seem that if you're sitting on one end of a garage door that's open versus the other end, you're outdoors in one, you're indoors in the other, that's ridiculous. There's the airflow, and the airflow is what helps to dilute
Absolutely.
any potential of
That's why I
virus.
say if you lump it under just personal safety, under the conditions deemed
Right.
safe for the public, that gets you away from any of the specific of architecture.
So a building that has, let's use Annie's for an example.
Right.
So you walk downstairs into that area
Their
down
patio,
below,
their open patio area.
If they can open the windows on the north side, the Kent Narrow side, and then the Red Eye Dock Bar end.
Right, and
so they
they're-
can open up every single one of those windows on
Then
three
they're
walls.
then they're outdoors at that point, because they got the open air flow, and it dilutes the airflow. That's what they're talking about.
Whether
the
it be a
open air.
garage door, or a window that cranks open, or a slider that opens it up.
Right. We're not talking about, you have a confined space, you open just one window, to like
Right,
airing out the kitchen when you smoke up the pan. That still would be.
But it would have to encompass a minimum of two walls, preferably three, that you can actually get good air.
And with this definition, it gives, if there's some structure that we haven't contemplated that would still be open air, it gives Dr. Ciatola the ability to say, yeah, that is exactly, that fits with what we're doing. And the goal behind this is to clear the confusion so we have more of these businesses that are open and operating.
And at the end of the day, Boca Code is open air is well within the Boca Code air changes per hour to meet the CDC guidelines for any infectious disease. I mean, an OR operating room is roughly 50% air change per hour, so you're changing the air in there a minimum of 50% of total volume of air. If you're in a three-sided open place with ceiling fans
Constant.
on, I mean, the air is moving at a much higher rate. You're changing the air over.
Same as
So,
outside.
I mean, it's not an issue of health. So, but I mean, I get it. And again, Chris has the caveat in there that it's got, approved by the health officer. So if there's an issue, it'll be addressed, and, hopefully the business can make a modification to get them so they are compliant if there is an issue now. But I think just to clarify for our businesses and all.
I think it's a great idea, considering there was a very vague description in the very beginning. They had less than 24 hours.
Right.
And here they've been sitting idle for all these months and, watching the numbers, go from black to red, and wonder if they're even going to be able to open up one day. That they were desperate. And in certain situations with certain restaurants, like, you know, you had to already have outside seating from the way that I understood it come Friday, 5 o'clock. And they were ordering tents, tables, and chairs if they didn't have outside seating and put it in their parking lot, so now we have it. So they were very creative in determining that they were outside seating, and I think when you talk about places that existing like Annie's or even Adams for that matter, they built that little area there and then they decided to enclose it for private parties, but you can open every single window on the full length of the side and then a door that leads into that patio area. So you don't have to get into that room by going into the restaurant. You can enter from outside. So again, I just thought it was too vague and it needed to be more specific. And I like your motion.
And the goal is we're trying, look, this is, the first pandemic we've dealt with a while, so we're going to make some missteps along the way, and interpretations are not always going to be perfect, and we're trying to make sure that we're doing what we can to monitor both safety and help the businesses.
So I think a great way would be to stand in the middle of that room with all the windows open, smoke a fine Cuban cigar, and if they can smell it outside, you're good to go.
You're volunteering?
One thing I want to caution against, though, is, and you brought it up and it kind of jogged my mind, is the fact that this is not an open license to set tents up in your parking lots and start serving food outside. There's still some accommodations, and I know that the question is going to come up. And I see it from a public safety standpoint, probably totally different than anybody else would, is the fact that if there are areas that a restaurant gets permitted for to serve outside under a tent, that's great, no problem. But that area should be defined, in my opinion, because if the sheriff comes up there and we have this big parking lot with several restaurants in it, and this guy's over here drinking a 40 in the corner, and then you have outdoor dining under a tent over here that's designated, where does that open container law end? I mean, it really gets into a spot where the sheriff's going to have to disseminate, is this guy in a legal place to be drinking an open beer, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's just having it defined, okay, here it is.
Well,
So.
in that paperwork,
Corner drinking?
40.
What the hell is a 40?
The 40.
That's right, you don't like beer, so you wouldn't know, Jim.
So in the applications
Think
that
about
were
some
submitted,
research.
the applications that were submitted to the restaurants in a hurry-up fashion. You know what a 40 is?
40? 40
It comes with a brown paper bag.
Ooh.
So, maybe missed my
40
train of
guys,
thought. Thanks a lot.
Dreaming about beer.
The paperwork that's submitted, didn't they have to have a drawing or a schematic?
Of existing. So you couldn't expand, you couldn't say, I'm going out in the parking lot and get that, correct?
I thought you had to have a drawing.
There is a process for
Yeah,
it.
there's a permit process for that.
Right, there was a process for that, right. But that was not the guarantee. That was not the, okay, you can open your doors.
Right,
It was basically, if
right.
you had existing outside seating and met the
You
criteria, you were
You were
good.
good to go with conditions.
If anybody wanted to come put a tent, absolutely, we encourage it, but just go say, hey, here's where we want to put the tent. This is
Right.
where our eating and dining and drinking area is going to be, so that everybody involved knows that, okay, that's where it's at.
Well, the Narrows did that. They put a tent
Another
up.
question.
And I don't think you have to worry about that because they're not selling 40s. So if someone's drinking a 40 under the tent, they
A
didn't buy it
magnum
from
of
them.
wine or something.
Another question is this a guideline, or is this something, as far as I know, the sheriff's not planning to run around, measuring things and looking at windows, so, I mean.
No, but Stevie, if somebody calls, I mean, look, we got some calls over the weekend for some of the dining. So if there's a call, at least the sheriff knows, okay, yeah, that's that's underneath the Kent Narrows Bridge. I don't think that's outdoor dining. So I'm probably going to have to go to that one. But, if it's in the Annie's parking lot, okay, why? Because they know that there's outdoor dining going
But
on
I
there.
think he's not responsible for enforcing this.
Well, open containers,
I
somebody
think it
was
would be
drinking.
I think it would be
Yeah.
the liquor inspector, right? Liquor inspector.
Or liquor
and
department.
the health
If
department.
somebody opened up a restaurant indoors, we would be responsible for enforcing that. So we have a list of everybody that's opening up. We know they're outdoors. We know these folks.
Yeah, but
So
I'm
it's not that complicated. If there is somebody that blatantly violates, the executive order, we would be potentially
Somebody decides to throw an
involved
indoor
in
party at a restaurant.
enforcing that. Yeah.
Right,
50
exactly.
people or 60
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
that's a different story entirely.
Yep.
So,
Okay, any other discussion on this? We are voting for, read it one more time for me, my friend.
definition of outdoor seating in Queen Anne's County.
The definition of outdoor, you don't want to read it one more time?
Want me to read it again?
Please do.
All right.
Just so the public might be more intrigued now to pay attention.
They might be asleep already.
That's probably are. Outdoor seating areas include areas utilizing tents, canopies, and coverings, as well as any space in any structure or building not actually enclosed on all sides by permanent walls or other physical barriers, and any other space or structure that the Queen Anne's County Health Officer or his designee determines is sufficient to permit appropriate circulation of outdoor airflow.
Excellent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Well done, Chris.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Any other business at this budget work session?
Probably, we sat down and had a meeting yesterday at the Kent Narrows Foundation to talk about some issues at our landings and piers regarding trash, and I think the Parks and Recs Department reacted swiftly to add additional garbage cans to try to pick up the flow. I mean, this was something that I think we were hit with weather-wise, and so, we'll make ongoing adjustments to make sure that, we can deal with the trash issues. One of the other things that we talked about was our fishing piers, and in particular, Roman Cove. And I brought this up, not anybody else, I did, but I feel strongly that pier, that fishing pier, is at the end of Route 8 in a residential neighborhood where sound travels. And currently, and it has been that I've been told, a 24-hour pier. In other words, people can come and fish there 24 hours a day. And I think because of the unique location of this pier, that I think we should strongly consider closing that pier for fishing at sunset and reopening at sunrise. Just something that I'm putting out there to you guys. I know we've had some complaints from citizens over the years. I know our landing person has gone down there and he's written citations, and put it on cars. And but I think the biggest complaint that we get from the folks down Route 8 that have reached out to me is the sound and the noise at night, which obviously travels. So I know this is not a common practice in our county to restrict the fishing piers to fishing sunset to sunrise to sunset, but I think, again, this being a unique situation, it being a residential area, that we consider doing that. I don't know what has to happen moving forward, a general consensus. I
think maybe my suggestion would be to send a letter to Steve Shanley, Director of Parks. He was there at the meeting, but say the commissioners would like to have the input of the Parks and Recs Advisory Board on doing just what you just explained, closing it from sunset to sunup, and let them vet it and see what they come back with the recommendation. Not that we have to follow the recommendation, but at least let them vet it, see what they say, and then bring it back here and have a discussion about that. Because fishing is an issue. It's an issue because of what's been going on across the bridge, and everyone being directed to our beaches, to our fishing facilities, and I, for one, love to fish. I understand that, but it's starting to get out of hand.
Well, we build these parks and we build these landings and these facilities for people to use. By design, that's what we do. We build them and people come, and I get it. But there are certain situations and scenarios where we have to be considerate of the folks that live here year-round and have to deal with certain issues that come to having these fishing piers open 24 hours a day. So I just think I'm not saying they can't fish, I'm just saying,
Put a limit on it.
sunrise to sunset.
So for a long time, I have been the strongest defenders of the right of people to fish on these things, and I support what you're saying. I think that's equitable and fair, and I can tell you that if you have a park or some area like that that's open at night, you're setting up for a living hell. We've got drugs and parking lots at Conquest that if we didn't close some of this park down, it would be a nightmare. We've got people parked there and drug needles on the ground and stuff now, so closing them down at night's a good idea.
Right. Again, please don't get me wrong, we built those parks and landings and places for citizens to go, whether they live in our county or not. We built them, and that's what they're designed for, so I get it. But there has to be some sort of controls, that's all.
Very good. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Have anything? Being none, I'm going to hold my comments till next Tuesday about what we're trying to do, multi-county coalition, and reaching out to the governor and expediting opening up businesses. I think the public needs to understand that if you don't feel safe, don't go into these businesses. Don't go into these establishments. There has to be some sort of accountability. I don't think that we are herd animals to where we need someone to tell us when to move and how to move. So, I think everybody's responsible for their own well-being, and and that goes the same thing with these business owners. So, Jonathan, Brittany, I want to thank you. Todd, this budget cycle, I know we haven't had a lot of input from the outside, but it's very clear, it's easy to understand, and we've got a definite system here that from year to year makes it easier and easier for us to move through this and navigate through it. So I greatly appreciate that. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Brittany?